Okay, so this is like a breakdown of the tutorial that I've sent out to a bunch of you from YouTube, and I've had a lot of questions and people say it doesn't make sense because there's no talking. I think I'm the only one who found it super helpful because there was no talking. But, so you get your fabric. Honestly, it doesn't matter which way you lay, right? We're doing a good thing by just making them. So stop trying to make them perfect and just make it. So I have my piece of fabric, which was fairly large. So I folded it in half. I took an iron to it so that it lays flat, just so that's easier to cut. Clearly I'm not even using a ironing board, like I'm just making it work, right? So I have this laid out, and then you can take any ruler that you have. I happen to have a sewing ruler. And then if you need to, you can use, if you don't have one of these, a piece of chalk will work. If you don't have a piece of chalk, even a Sharpie will work. So you take a pen. This is a fabric pen that I have. And so it's going to be 15 inches on one side, which I can't see purple in here. Okay, so it'll be 15 inches on one side by 8 inches. And so what I'm doing is measuring that 15. Your fabric, if it's brand new, will have the edging. If you're using leftover fabric from someone, don't worry about it. If it has the edging, you just don't want that. That's like useless. So I'm measuring 15 from the edge where that isn't. And then it's 8 inches this way. So then I measure 8 inches. And then for me, because I'm awful at cutting fabric, like the worst, I even take my ruler and I'm just gonna draw it on here. Now because I have mine folded over twice, I'm gonna get 2 by cutting this one time. If I'm lucky, not quite. So then we'll cut our fabric, and once you cut your fabric on your sewing machine, there's 2 things. The one I sent most people, they did a zigzag stitch as your like serger stitch. You don't have to necessarily do that. So let's say your machine doesn't have a zigzag stitch. You don't have to, you don't necessarily have to do that. It's just a little bit helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna cut this out. And if it's not exact, it's totally fine. Okay, so I do have the zigzag stitch, so I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna put, mine is 8 is my zigzag stitch. And then the stitch width is as big as it'll let me do it. And so you start with your presser foot lowered, and then you just sew straight down the 8-inch side. You do that on both sides. And then, this is what it looks like. Then you go back to your ironing station, and because we did that zigzag stitch, you can fold this in. So if you can't do or don't have the zigzag stitch, all you're gonna do, what is this? This is like less than a half.
Like a 1/4 inch?
Yeah, like a 1/4 inch. Then if you don't have the zigzag stitch, you're just gonna fold in a 1/4 inch, and you're gonna iron that flat, and you'll see why in a moment. So either way, everyone is gonna do that step. While you're here, to save you time, I recommend that you cut off the loose strings if you used the zigzag stitch. So before I do the next step, I'm just gonna cut off these extra strings from this. Okay, then you're literally just gonna fold this piece in half with front faces together. so that you're looking at the wrong face of the fabric. And then you're going to press this so that your edges line up on top of each other. And then you're going to iron this. You want it to be nice and flat. Then, before you go back to your sewing machine, somehow mark for yourself 1.5 inches from both ends. So 1.5 inches in and 1.5 inches in on this side. This is where we're going to sew. We're going to be sewing from this edge to the 1.5 inches and from the 1.5 inches to that edge. We're not going to sew in between. You do not sew here. This is where the pocket comes in. This is where they can put in a filter so that they can reuse these. This is why they like them. So your sewing machine, if you had a zigzag stitch, you're gonna go back, oops, this one. You're gonna go back to number 1. If you have a fancy sewing machine, it'll reset all of these to a normal standard, and so I'm just gonna leave that because that's what I want. And so then you put your presser foot, so the outside of your fabric lines up with the outside edge of that presser foot. You put it on, and then we're gonna sew from here to my blue line, but we're gonna also back stitch so that the stitch stays in place and doesn't come unraveled. So we're gonna do a couple of stitches, and then mine has a fancy reverse button for that. So now it's going to back stitch. And then I'm going to stitch over it again to that blue line. And I'm going to back stitch there. I'm going to take it off. And I'm going to come down here. Line it up with that edge and that blue line. And then I'm going to sew. I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to sew. And back stitch. So there is a gap now, right here. So now you come over here, you cut your strings off again, per usual, bye-bye strings. And then we're going to do something that's a little complicated. This is the hardest part, I think, of the whole thing. So you want to put this kind of in the middle. It doesn't have to be exact, and it doesn't really matter right at the moment, but we're going to press the seam open. So that just means folding this back and pressing it. Now, as you can see, I purposefully did a pretty cruddy job sewing this so you can see how much it does not matter and that you don't need to worry about it. So then you pick one side or the other. It doesn't matter which side of this you use one or the other. And we're going to attempt to not sew this fabric to this one. So you're going to scrunch it, and we're going to work really slow. And we're going to put our needle in first, and you're going to use this middle line of where the fabric's opening is as where you want, there's like a line on your presser foot. You want that line to be pretty close or onto that little middle line that we have. And then we put the foot down and you sew, back stitch, and then you sew, and then you keep making sure that that underneath fabric is rolled up so you're not stitching on it. You stop, pull it back. And now I can see that I have all that fabric bunched up here, so there's no way I'm going to sew it. So now I can go all the way to the end and back stitch. Take it off. Come back over to your station, cut your strings. Then you turn the thing in the right side out, inside out, right side out, so that you can
Pattern side out.
Pattern side out. There you go. Front facing. So let me turn it. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Then you measure from this top stitch line that you just did. We are measuring so that we want 1/2 inch right here. So you can mark it if you want. You're just gonna press this line in though, so only have to mark it if you feel like that would be helpful in folding it. So I just wanna fold it up so that it's just 1/2 inch. If it's a little more, it's not the end of the world. Okay, then you press that nice and flat. The more you press it, the easier this next step will be. So now that it's nice and flat, the fabric is pretty much stuck to itself, which will help it so you don't need pins or anything. So then we're gonna sew using the presser foot line that's here is gonna line up with the edge of the fabric. So I'm gonna stick my needle in, double check that that lines up. And then I'm gonna start sewing. I'm gonna back stitch, and I'm gonna sew almost to the end. This is where it's just kind of a guess, right? And that's all right if it doesn't quite line up with that middle line. If it lines up with the outside of the foot instead of that middle line, that's okay. It doesn't really matter. But you're gonna turn, keep that, your needle is in the fabric when I lifted my presser foot up. So therefore it's like it won't come off of here while you're doing that. And you put the presser foot back down and you sew down to here. One more, I think. We'll see. And then you turn again. We're gonna sew to this side. Same thing, needle in, turn the fabric, then we're gonna sew all the way to this side and back stitch at the end. Okay, now that we have that, you're gonna clip off the fabric, or the things. You're gonna take your zip tie, twisty tie things, and we're gonna guess measurement. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I just lay mine usually on top, kind of guess that that's about to the end. For me, I make a little thing, and then I clip it. So now I'm gonna stick that inside of the little lip. And I have tried to do this without pinning it, and I have had no luck. If you are a better sewer, you don't have to pin it, but I end up having to pin it. So I'm making sure you can like feel it. It's like a lump. So it's like a lump in there. So I'm just gonna pin to the outside of that so it doesn't come out while I'm sewing it. As you can see it's already coming out. So by pinning it, I'm making sure it's staying inside of that little flap, because we are gonna sew right along that edge. This little wire will be what goes around your nose for the mask. The twisty ties work great because you can form it to your nose. So now it's just a straight stitch again. Put that in. Don't sew over your pins. You will break your sewing needle. You stitch, you back stitch, and then you stitch. Okay, we cut our strings. And now we go back over here. This is the important part. Okay, we have a pocket, right? You want your pocket opening to be towards the bottom, and then we want to flip it over. So my pocket opening is down here now. I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it up like so. This one should be bigger than the rest of them, and our top one will be bigger. So this one and the top one will be about the same, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So then I just fold up. So we're creating 3 pleats. They don't have to be perfect, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to purposely do mine pretty janky. So this one is about the same distance as this one, and then there's 2 little ones in the middle. Then you press this out really good. On both sides. You do one side, and then when you flip it over, you can see like that. They're not great. Like this one is like really tiny. It's totally fine that those middle ones, see, I purposefully did, like this is not a problem at all. It's fine. This is going to be the front anyways. This is what you're going to see. This is the only part that matters. So then, now that it's nice and ironed, you're just going to, doesn't matter which side, if you do it on technically the front or if you do it on the back with the pocket, it doesn't matter. You're just going to stitch this down so it stays in this pleated mode. And then I'm lining up my presser foot with the edge of the fabric. So essentially it should be over or close to this line we already have. Per usual, back stitch. And then flip it over, do this side. And then we cut our strings. We should check our cookies. The last steps are to trim off, just because these will just be annoying. If you have little threadies, trim them off. Okay, so then you're gonna take an extra bit of your fabric, and when you cut into it, you'll probably have some sort of odd strip. So that's what I'm using, is an odd strip from mine. Because this isn't done like a professional thing, we're gonna put this little piece on. If you're really picky and you want it to match up, then you need to cut it in the same way as this one was cut. I personally have not been doing that when making these, and nobody has noticed. So I'm just doing, like, getting the most use out of my fabric. So I'm gonna take the little mask, I'm gonna lay it on here. You want to have some on each side of it. This happens to be the right length, and I folded it over so that I only have to cut this once. Then from here, so one side will be so that it's a little, so it'll be different with every mask. So this fits this one, and then it's 3 inches. So I'm gonna measure my 3 inches. You can, same thing, you can draw the line if you need to. This is so small, I can probably just cut it. And it's okay if it's a little more, it's fine. And then because I folded in half, I'm gonna cut that. Now, I have found that I don't even need to pin it. You can pin it if you need to, that's also fine. The one thing I do is you're gonna lay it so that it's wrong side up, because it's going to fold over. So that's the only thing I've been checking, is to make sure that doesn't look completely wonky when I do like this. One would be here and one would be there. I feel like this one is the one that's upside down. Nope, they're both right. So I'm gonna just leave that. So it's something you can play with if you want. Otherwise, don't worry about it and just lay the fabric wrong side down, pattern to pattern, so that you are looking at the wrong side. Then we're just going to stitch. And you can feel where the edge of this is underneath it. That's where you're starting. And I'm lining up the edge of the foot with the edge of the fabric. And I'm gonna sew a little. And then I'm gonna back stitch. And I'm gonna sew until I get to the end, which I can kind of feel. It's okay if you go a little past it. And then I'm gonna back stitch. And then I'm gonna do the other side. Okay, you cut your strings. Always cutting the strings. Ooh, these ones are tiny. Weep, weep. Okay, then I'm gonna flip them. And then I've just found I could just literally use my fingernail and flatten out these little sides. Then you're gonna fold this in. And I found that you can literally just use your fingernail to flatten this as well, so that you're creating this little like seam thingy. I'm gonna fold this one in, do the same thing. Then you just fold this down part way. This fold right here is dependent on what you're using. If you're using the skinny elastic, you're gonna wanna fold this even more. If you're using fatter elastic, you wanna fold this a little less. We're creating a loop right here that you're going to slide ribbon, fabric, whatever you're using to tie the mask to your head. So that's where this size comes in, and you gotta play with that depending on what you're using. So it's like this, and you can use pins if you need to. Put this in there, back stitch, back stitch. This side is done. Voila. Let me do the other side. And then you string whatever it is you're using through it, and you're done. That's the mask. Okay, so a trick if you have fat elastic, because I know that dogs quit. I know there's a shortage on elastic. Chomped and Shinobu. So a trick is to fold this in half and kind of press it down and kind of stretch it a little, and then get a safety pin and pin it in. And then I use a chopstick, because that's what I had, to like make sure that this hole was nice and open, that I'm gonna string this through so I can see through it.
Oh my God, where are you moving?
I don't know.
You're just all over the dang place.
But I stick the clothespin.
Just stay in one spot. You don't move, I move.
I put clothespin. So I'm gonna stick this clothespin in here. Or safety pin, I mean. And then I'm gonna grab it from the other side. I'm gonna pull this through. And because we folded it, because it's like a fattier one, it should go through pretty easily. And then, this is the key. You have to do this side down too. So I've been making the mistake all day of not doing that, and then you have to take it out.
So that it makes one continuous loop.
Well, yeah, but I'm going to show you, you have to sew it together. You have to sew your elastic together. Okay, so I pin it through. Take my... Okay, so I drop that down into here. Apparently I'm not great at videos. The husband is getting irritated already. I'm gonna grab the safety pin and pull this through. Okay, so now that it's all the way through, the other trick here is to try to flatten it as best as you can so that it doesn't get twisted, so they're like the same, if that makes sense. So it's like flowing in one way and it's not twisted. And so then you overlay the elastic like so, and you stitch it. If you have skinny elastic, you can do the one that you just put over your ears. But like I said, they're running low on elastic, so that's what I got. So I just went back and forth a bunch. That's it. Mask is done.
The elastic is 18 inches long right now, is how long we've made it.
Oh, yeah.
if you're gonna make it tie in the back, you'll want to make it longer, and if you're gonna do the loops, how long are the loops on
the loops? If
that
you
go around the ears?
those are 10 inches.
So each loop is 10 inches that goes around the ears.
Yeah. So this one looks like this when it's done. So an accordion folds open. And this is the wire. You can form fit it to your face, and you can tuck this under here. The pocket is where the nose was, so you can stick filter fabric in here. A few things for filter fabric. Somebody donated to us vacuum bags. These actually work pretty great as filters. You can cut them into the right size strips to put in there. I saw a tutorial where you can get furnace filters that the highest one, they'll say like
The HEPA filter?
yeah, they say bacteria something else and virus blocking or whatever, so you can get those, and you just cut off the metal part, and it's just fabric in there that accordion folds out, and you can cut those. The insert for this is slightly bigger than it is now, right? Because this accordion folds open. So you'll want to make your filter a little bit bigger and like kind of bunch it up, and then you slide it in. I have been just putting these, washing these, and then putting them in a plastic bag so that they're clean and I haven't had my germs on them, and then cutting the filter fabric and putting it in a separate bag. They've asked that they be put in Ziploc bags. So I'm putting them in Ziploc bags and then the filters in a smaller Ziploc bags and attaching the two together.